Hello viewers, my name is Adam.
And I'm Aaron.
This is a Give Me a Production to bring you another TV series review.
We finally came to the finish line. It's been quite the ride.
Yeah. Wow, for such a very small show such as this one and then to have grown so exponentially over the course of like nearly a decade. Almost as like about the same as long as old as his channel, actually.
Yeah, to be honest with you, that actually kind of checks out.
Yeah, and what we're finally discussing in detail is Stranger Things.
Now, when this first jumped off, we knew this show was actually going to turn out to be something pretty special. But then once we finally got into it, in its entirety, we definitely just fell in love with it.
Now, we have not discussed any individual season on this channel, but we were paying attention to it. We reacted and reviewed most of the trailers from each consecutive season.
Everybody remembers that good Michael Jackson Thriller trailer.
Yeah, that was a very, very favorite. That was back in season 2. And the thing for Stranger Things to be so popular in the midst of so many other programs on Netflix, the show was among its most earliest dramas series, and mind you, Netflix only been producing original shows 3 years prior.
But again, with this particular show, this was pretty much their, one of their flagship ones that was literally became a worldwide phenomenon.
And I would say the popularity, for the most part, has been warranted. But I feel as though it got to a point that even with some of the criticisms that have been seen through the show, I feel as though Stranger Things became something that's too big to fail. And it's a good thing they did decide to end the story where it did, because
it definitely has gotten to the point where anything more than what it just did would have felt completely overbloated and just would have went into a direction that honestly it didn't need to go. But for the most part, when we look at it from this point of view, from just looking at it as the story of Stranger Things, there's a few things we gotta say.
Stranger Things is a 1980s period piece that the whole started off with the vanishing of young Will Byers, who, after playing a game with his friends of Dungeons and Dragons,
or D&D for y'all,
mysteriously vanishes. And the series explores a lot of what 1980s media mostly been known for, some from government conspiracies, coming of age situations, a lot of what was at the height of the Cold War aspect of it, and a very Stephen King-esque element.
It's, getting the elephant out the room. This whole show was pretty much a love letter to everything that Stephen King has to offer.
Well,
but
broad strokes.
Very broad strokes. I mean, at the end of the day, this show is uniquely its own, beast. But
stylistically, it was if Steven Spielberg and John Carpenter shook hands and collaborated, and that's basically what Stranger Things is basically presented as. As we said, this show grew very exponentially. So this first season, it was mainly very lean, so small in scope, but yet it was very known for. Even though it highlighted and embraced some of the 1980s eccentricities, it actually also turned inward on some of those tropes, those particular character archetypes that you usually were familiar with, and giving a lot more depth to certain type of characters that you wouldn't think would actually needed to be explored that way.
And looking at it just from season to season to season, the first part of the story was literally centered around that, again, the disappearance of Will Byers and how his friends tried to follow the breadcrumbs that eventually led them towards another very important character, a little girl named 11 who has psychic abilities, tracking and using, helping her out from her escape from the governmental facility that was basically trying to get her back, and then her helping him trying to find the pathways to their missing friend. Stumbled upon a greater mystery that surrounded this unique other world called the Upside Down.
Yeah, we hear even though that this show is mostly set within the fictional town of Hawkins, Illinois, I believe. You see these kids and also adults and young teen to young adult characters facing off against threats, domestic, foreign, and also interdimensional. And in some cases, if you like a cynic, like season 1, if you were to stop right there, is its own solid thing.
Yeah, honestly, if they didn't get to, see to continue on the storyline, it would have been perfect where it was.
We know that it did continue on for 4 more seasons, and I would say seasons 1 through 3 were they had that more leaner aspect that's usually found in like a John Carpenter, Steven Spielberg situation, and then when it came to season 4, it really at the end of season 3 and onward to the end, it really expanded in scope on the type of situations that they are dealing with. I think also that to its benefit and detriment, Stranger Things is an example of expanding in the scope of the story, but not really understanding what's at stake.
On some levels, it's handled pretty well, but on others, it tends to unravel a little bit and is pretty shaky.
Like, it got to a point where, and for the most part, I would say it had more of a balance in exploring juggling so much, despite only dealing with on average 8 to 9 episodes per season. It got to once it get to season mostly 5, which is the last season, it highlighted some of the more criticism that would otherwise be more minor in perspective if you're seeing the grand scope of things, but unfortunately, I don't know what happened during the huge gaps in between seasons. It got management on storytelling became very overridden on many situations.
A lot of the concepts of characters just talking about certain circumstances or situations that happen that we weren't really necessarily there for, or
they just literally repeating the plot of events that really just happened 5 minutes ago.
It just doesn't work well within the visual medium of television or movies, however you want to look at this. We understand that Netflix pretty much as this characteristic in a lot of their, original content programming, mostly because this is a binge platform where they understand that individuals are not going to be, at least not everybody is going to be catering to the concept of actually paying attention to each episode with a fine-tooth comb and watching it. But for the mass majority of, anybody else who actually just sits down to actually enjoy these stories, it does kind of break the immersion of it.
From the very broad strokes of things, there is still plenty of light with the story we had to offer. I do like the lore. You can tell that from the when you're dealing and talking about the very sci-fi fantasy aspects of it, you can tell that they were laying out the groundwork well ahead of time.
Exactly. The story, again, going back for Elle's storyline and her psychic abilities and her connections towards the military and the program that, birthed her, basically. I was really engaged with that. I wish that certain, elements towards that was done better, or at least handled a little bit more efficiently. But for the mass majority of it, I was enthralled with it.
But I feel as though when each season grew, when I talk about when they didn't really understand or try to minimize what's at stake, despite the growing scope of the story, the show being such a big ensemble cast, it got to points where about a third of the cast characters, not really of them had much to do after a certain point in the story, depending on what season that particular character dropped off and its significance. And sometimes, the show is partly a horror show. There are a lot of deaths that did happen, but some people, an argument can say that you don't need death to raise stakes. But if you're not going to show death, there are certain avenues where you need to emphasize the danger as well, where especially with the misdirect that happened from the cliffhanger ending of season 4 and into season 5. Pretty sure most people were expecting a big apocalyptic event.
Oh yeah.
That
should have really been worldwide, not just contained within Hawkins.
But for better or worse, a lot of what is liked or disliked about Stranger Things is done with the characters. So let's start with Will Byers, whose character, for the most part, in the beginning, is defined mainly as a victim.
Now, Noah Schnapp, his portrayal of Will Byers, I enjoy it. Yes, in a lot of ways, he is a victim character that constantly has things going on with him that you wouldn't want to see anybody have to go through, but he was enduring. I absolutely felt for this kid and felt for his journey, especially when you realize how horribly abused he was being, forced into situations for.
Yeah, there's a clear loss of innocence in this character that's mostly felt in season 3, right after a lot of the trauma of seasons 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Season 4, he shared with his brother right after season 2. I believe this character, him, his brother Jonathan, their significance really declined.
Yeah.
Until season 5 when they brought back.
And to be honest with you, I like where they were going with this character in season 5. I feel as though some of the elements that was introduced in this last season should have really actually been expressed earlier on, and that would have helped this character be more engaged with the plot and actually have a lot more to do. Specifically, there's a particular area in season 5 where a reveal is given to us.
That was already hinted on,
honestly, you could have snapped on to that real quick. But even with that being said, I feel as though the handling of that particular reveal honestly should have been done far better, and has been done better by other.
Not better, effective.
Yeah, effective. Handling of the particular story, subject matter, and it's a shame that they didn't really do that well. It honestly felt as though the creators of the show really were struggling to understand what to do with this particular type of character, and that's a shame considering other shows and other stories give you more of a blueprint to be able to write and direct this particular subject.
So at the end of the day, Will Byers is a mixed bag of a character.
Exactly.
They have the character of Mike Wheeler, who from season 1 he was the main character in season 1.
Yeah.
Main show, especially the main child character, who developed such a strong sense of leadership and empathy.
But at the end of the day, I feel as though with his particular story, he almost entirely gets wrapped up into his relationship with the other characters, 11, and I feel as though he never really rises above that station, even towards the end.
Phil Wolfhard, who plays the character, I would say that you can clear from his performance, it actually also dwindled, because I feel as though that he felt that his performance were beneath him at certain points of the story. Not to say they're completely different from the other two main in this friend group of characters of Dustin and Lucas, who I feel as though their characters been consistent, really well done.
And especially when I look at the character of Lucas, a character who honestly at the end of the day, the beauty behind his character is that he doesn't feel like a token character, only because his storyline is stuff that you would actually see in other character storylines that you would appreciate, and they do it well enough that it never feels as though it's just hammered on for him to do something. No, it actually feels as though his storyline was organically done, and I feel as though he's always brought his especially the actor
Caleb McLaughlin.
brought his A game in each and every installment of the series.
Yeah, and for Dustin, played by Gaten Matarazzo, a character who has always been self-confident, despite his very more of the nerdy character persona, who developed such a rich relationships with basically a positive relationship with mostly everybody in the cast that resonates very strong. I feel as though Dustin, from even more so, is more the heart of Stranger Things.
Yes.
Him and 11. If the show take those two characters out.
They're the individuals who takes charge in almost every particular situation they find themselves in, and it's always interesting to see how well they are able to maneuver and interact with with what they're doing, and how they are the ones that are always looked upon for solutions, and they deliver. Even when situations where you feel as though there's no way in heck any of these kids, let alone and cast members, would have been able to survive the events they done. No, it almost feels just what they do is just enough, especially with Dustin. There's always enough info that they give to us, and enough skill and know-how that it just makes sense that they are able to handle the situations they do.
They have the character of Max. Sadie Sink's performance, I feel as though when she her debut back in season 2 onward, you can tell that she has a strong career going forward.
I'm very looking forward to this actress's career. Especially with the type of projects, hopefully they'll start picking even bigger and better roles, because I feel as though this individual has star power potential.
Like you have the character of Max, who's presented such as first as the tomboyish girl, but who's actually to grow and you start seeing a lot more of her background story, especially with the character of her stepbrother Billy. We start to see even more very appreciative of how much Max brings to Stranger Things.
But of course, it's not just the little, the kids, friend group we have to look at. There are other individuals that are intertwined with this as well, especially with the older teenagers.
Of Nancy Wheeler, who has a very dynamic character arc.
Listen, where Nancy Wheeler's story arc really rockets into, you would never know that this is what this individual had in store for themselves. It's almost a night and day situation in a certain respect, but not in a bad way. Her transition from the small town girl who was that's popular with everybody, but
she turned survival's guilt into her own weapon. Jonathan Byers, Will's brother, whose most defining character trait is that he's a very caring brother.
Yeah, a caring person in general. He truly feels for the individuals that he deeply cares for.
But unfortunately, I feel as though as the series continue, his character more significantly lacked in significance and participation.
And that's mostly because, like another character such as Mike, his character development almost entirely centers around his relationship with the character of Nancy, and it just becomes
it drags.
It really drags. So the will they, won't they scenario, and it just does that too long.
And it's tied to another character, fan favorite character of Steve, who was presented as the stereotypical 1980s bully character.
What could have ended up just being a throwaway, type bully character really blossoms into a true humbling that really takes this character in a direction that I feel everybody was able to gravitate to.
It was one of the most surprising character arcs in the series. Joe Keery, who has so much earnestness, he started to be a lot more likable near the end of season 1, but it really blossomed in season 2 once he starts having this surprising friendship with the character of Dustin, and when he starts basically being dubbed as the mom or babysitter of the group because he's always usually the one who's he's the main muscle, one of the muscles for the young teen characters going to young adults. He's usually side by side with the children cast.
And I feel as though I gotta point this out is for a character that was supposed to be characterized as a macho type guy, it was actually pretty refreshing to see an individual take on more of the caring and protector roles.
Mm-hmm. And this sense of security that he provides helped with another character, Robin, who is the last of the main young adult characters. She played by Maya Hawke, the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman, who clearly steals the show as a very strong comedic relief character.
Mm-hmm.
But her eccentric, knowledgeable, personality really benefits a lot to the show. She was a really good addition. No criticisms that actually I don't feel.
Yeah, I feel as though out of all the characters, aside from maybe, I feel as though Lucas and Dustin, I feel as though her story arc that you get with her is consistent and doesn't really have any real issues at all. Winona Ryder's character,
Joyce Byers.
This is really one of those roles where everybody, I feel as though at this point, or at least it is for individuals who are fans of theatrical
1980s movies from back in the day.
Yeah, Winona Ryder is a household name,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel as though
this show brought back her career.
It really did.
She brings back that quirky personality that we know and love, but there's a fierce, caring urgency because with her character, especially back in season 1 and 2, when she is one of the main driving forces who's trying to find her son. I would say her character arc going forward, it mainly appears with the other character of Officer Harbour. Her storyline with once it starts to get shifting to with that relationship, I'd have a mixed bag reception with that, mainly because of how Chief Harbour, who is along with her, is very engaged with a lot of the very supernatural dealings that's going on here.
Oh yeah.
There came a point where I feel the Harbour story really should have ended a lot sooner than it really did.
Yeah, I feel as though especially when they kind of read in an area where he could have just ended and it would have been just perfect, where if they stopped it right there, that would have allowed for Joyce's character to have a lot more urgency towards the end.
And it's like she's built into the role with a lot of independence because she's basically a single mother, and a single mother trying to make ends meet. And with Hopper's character, he's playing off the character, he's usually playing off that down to earth action hero, or strong masculine figure of sorts, with a very very sensitive sensitive personality in the heart of it. Once it starts, there's a point where in the 80s Cold War scares, there's a Russian storyline that is very stereotypical, and I feel as though that was part of the weakest parts of Stranger Things as a whole. That it wasn't needed, and especially once season 5 begins, it really has no weight. And let's talk about one of the main antagonistic force in the show, and Vecna.
Now, Vecna, or Henry, or aka One, once we learn his elements within the story, was immediately presented as a strong antagonistic force. He was very threatening. Always felt as though he was multiple steps ahead of his characters, and he proves that more than enough times. And I feel as a lot of the wonderful characteristics of this particular character is emphasized thanks to the actor that portrays him.
Jamie Campbell Byers, he played so well. Vecna. Whether he's playing him in this human form or this very interdimensional altered state. His story is very, once he appears late into the series. Very Freddy Krueger coded. I would say by series end, very small presence. Outside the interactions with most of the characters, he's not the only major threat in the series. Back in season, more of the overarching threat of the Mind Flayer, who's been had a presence known since back early season 2, season 2, 3, and now and going forward. Who's even more of a very vague sense of a threat that should have been more explored, possibly more so in earlier seasons. And to finish off the characters run section, basically the main draw of the show, 11.
Yeah.
Millie Bobby Brown, this is her standout role. She's playing a character who really lost her childhood.
Oh boy!
And this very awkward personality that she has, it develops over time when she gets more sociable, but there is still a sense of that disconnect that she has that Millie Bobby Brown's portrayed very effectively. Her power set in the show, I would say, is wildly inconsistent in the show.
Yeah, in areas she feels as though she's the most powerful thing around, but then there's other areas where it's almost like they give her the quote-unquote 90s X-Men Jean Grey effect, where she gets weakened in certain areas and just feel like, okay, but you can do all this from the get-go, from the earlier parts. Why is that a factor for you now?
In some ways it's frustrating, but we can tell that she is the real glue to the series, to the point that they really do take her out, the show really do fall apart.
Yeah, there was really absolutely no real way you could see anybody, dealing with half the stuff they actually dealt with without this character.
Thankful that the show's production was able to hold together mostly over the course of this show. Now, when we say, again, the show started out very small in scope, and it grew big. There was a lot of creativity that was explored in the earlier seasons that I feel as though that you don't necessarily appreciate until you start seeing from after the last season. You can't tell, no matter what, when the show began, that it had a low budget.
Yeah.
And they were able to stretch it off with some very unique visuals, from Joyce Byers' Christmas lighting to the unique way they portrayed Eleven's
telekinetic abilities,
particularly in the astral plane.
That was probably some of the most unique and interesting things anybody has done with the concept of telekinesis or telekinetic abilities. That void that she walks through is just interesting.
It embraces the 1980s fashion and architecture and aesthetic, both the best and worst of that era, with very questionable hairstyles.
And then you got the creature developments. The Demogorgon, probably one of the most iconic creatures now for modern days, that honestly deserves some deserved praise. I absolutely love the creatures that we are introduced to in this series.
Yeah, the show being as horror coded as possible, but still maintaining very all ages appeal. At times it can get very graphic, surprisingly so, but it gets really big. Still had that very inconsistency on when the stakes are really involved here.
Yep.
They're getting to a point where when it did start having season 4 and 5 with a huge over-reliance on CG, and VFX, positing that was fairly hit and miss. Like the quality of CGI is good, but the compositing, I don't know, because of the production delays going in between the seasons, but clearly mismanagement of wasn't as polished as it could have been. But the scope of this series, by the end of season 3 and going on in 4 and 5, this is definitely a show that could have at times been shown in theaters. So one of the clue things that Stranger Things embraced was the very synth related score that the show has.
That opening sequence is definitely on the top tier of openings.
Yeah, Michael Staine and Kyle Dixon, who composes the score, they were really bringing in the John Carpenter's school of music here.
Yeah.
Plenty of very symphonic scores that really hampers in the tone of what they're trying to go for. But overall, for Stranger Things, a long time coming to discuss on this channel.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say going into this into the final season, I would have given this series a grade.
Yeah.
Despite some of its fallbacks, but season 5 did.
It stumbled a bit.
It was definitely a mixed bag. Now, as far as comparisons go, on series finales for very popular shows,
This was pretty much within the mid-range area. It definitely could have been better, and it should have been better given the stakes that were supposed to be laid out before us, and the responsibility to the story structure that should have been told and the direction there you should have went to. But
we do want to acknowledge the good that was presented here from seasons past. So overall, Stranger Things is a good series still.
yes,
I would say at the most part, it's split down the middle in terms of reception.
you either liked it or you didn't, and in our particular
We're slightly for that season alone is slightly positive,
Mm-hmm.
but it is clearly faulty.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the next big genre series that does
Whoever
get,
it might be.
can really land it and make that landing.
Exactly. But where do you all fall? Were you fans of the Stranger Things from start to finish? How do you feel as though they stuck the landing for season 5? And are you interested? Maybe they might revisit some of this elements if there could be spinoffs to this.
There are spinoffs in development.
Well, there you go. But where y'all feel about Stranger Things?
Yeah, let's discuss. My name is Adam.
And I'm Eric.
This has been a Seeking Media Productions. Please be sure to follow us on our other social media outlets of Letterboxd, X, Instagram, and Threads for other content we don't necessarily post on this channel.
See y'all.
See you.